点ターン。私はビスマル。敵との戦闘経験なら結構ある。問題があれば私に聞いて。K を待たせたな。ああ、そうだ。これは鉄血艦隊の指導者として行事に参加した時に制する。こうして危険だけど、ついつい喋り方も少し変わってしまう。ダンス？いや、別に断るつもりはないけど、ただ今までは一度も誘われたこともなくて。指揮官まだ気だるい顔して。さあ、頭を上げて胸を締めて目をはっきり。よし、我の射程内によき真理あり。
Bismarck was the first of two Bismarck-class battleships built for the
Kriegsmarine
and was named after Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck is one of the few ships that was considered to be male. This was done at the behest of Captain Lindemann, who helmed the vessel during its maiden voyage, and considered the ship too powerful to be classified as female. Bismarck and her sister ship Tippets were the largest battleships ever built by Germany, and two of the largest built by any European power. U-556 and Bismarck had been neighbors in the ways at Blom and Voss, and their construction was completed at about the same time. In January 1941, as U-556's commissioning ceremony approached, the commander of U-556 wanted a band for the celebration, but could not afford to hire one. The commanding officer of Bismarck lent him his ship's band. As thanks, the commander of U-556 drew up a humorous
Patenschaftsurkunde
certificate of sponsorship, promising that U-556 would protect Bismarck. A drawing shows him as the Knight
Parzival,
his nickname, on the deck of U-556, simultaneously bringing down planes with a sword and reaching underwater to stop a torpedo with his thumb. A second drawing then shows the submarine towing the battleship to safety. The text accompanying the drawing reads,
U-556, 500 tons, hereby declare before Neptune, Lord over oceans, seas, lakes, rivers, brooks, ponds, and rivulets, that we will provide any desired assistance to our big brother, the battleship Bismarck, 42,000 tons, at any place on the water, underwater, on land, or in the air. Hamburg, January 28, 1941. Commander and crew U-556.
Operation
Rheinübung
was the first sortie for the Bismarck. It was the sortie into the Atlantic by the German battleship Bismarck and heavy cruiser
Prinz Eugen
on 27 May 1941, during World War II. This operation was aimed at blocking Allied shipments to the United Kingdom. German Naval Command did not take into account the Royal Navy's determination to destroy the German surface fleet. To make sure that Bismarck was sunk, the Royal Navy would ruthlessly strip other theaters of action. This would include denuding valuable convoys of their escorts. The British would ultimately deploy 6 battleships, 3 battlecruisers, 2 aircraft carriers, 16 cruisers, 33 destroyers, and 8 submarines, along with patrol aircraft. It would become the largest naval force assigned to a single operation up to that point in the war. The British Royal Navy learned of Bismarck's sortie after the Swedish cruiser Gotland spotted the vessels passing through the western Baltic Sea on the 20th of May. British reconnaissance aircraft confirmed the Germans' presence in Norway. The Royal Navy dispatched vessels to patrol the likely routes, including the heavy cruisers HMS Norfolk and Suffolk. Norfolk and Suffolk spotted Bismarck and
Prinz Eugen
on the evening of the 23rd of May. Prince of Wales and the Hood made contact with the German force early on the morning of the 24th of May, and the action started at 5:52 a.m., with the combatants about 25,000 yards, 23,000 meters, apart. Gunners on both British ships initially mistook
Prinz Eugen
that was in the lead for Bismarck and opened fire on her. Both German ships were firing at Hood. Hood suffered an early hit from
Prinz Eugen,
which started a rapidly spreading fire amidships. Less than 10 minutes after the British opened fire, one or more of Hood's magazines exploded, probably as the result of a directed via 38 centimeters, 15 inches, shell from Bismarck. The massive explosion broke the great battlecruiser's back, and she sank within minutes. All but 3 of her 1,417-man crew died, including the commanding officer of the squadron. Both sides had received extensive damage. HMS Prince of Wales, Norfolk and Suffolk continued to tail the German ships. Due to the damage received by Bismarck, it was flooding and losing fuel. This not only hampered its mobility, but also made the ship easier to spot. Bismarck started to move for France for repairs while
Prinz Eugen
was detached in order to continue the mission. The British public was shocked that their most emblematic warship had been destroyed so suddenly, with the loss of more than 1,400 of her crew. The Admiralty mobilized every available warship in the Atlantic to hunt down and destroy Bismarck. During the early evening of the 24th of May, an attack was made by a small group of Swordfish biplane torpedo bombers from the aircraft carrier HMS Victorious. One hit was scored but caused only superficial damage to Bismarck's armored belt. Bismarck was able to evade the Royal Navy pursuers through maneuvering. However, the British had a stroke of luck on the 26th of May. In mid-morning, a reconnaissance aircraft spotted Bismarck via a trailing oil slick from the ship's damaged fuel tank, and reported her position to the Admiralty. From then on, the German ship's position was known to the British, although the enemy would have to be slowed significantly if heavy units hoped to engage outside the range of German land-based aircraft. All British hopes were now pinned on Force H, whose main units were the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal, the battlecruiser HMS Renown, and the light cruiser HMS Sheffield. That evening, and in atrocious weather conditions, Swordfish from Ark Royal launched an attack. The first wave mistakenly targeted Sheffield, which had orders to close in on and shadow Bismarck. Precious time was lost by this incident, but the magnetic detonators on the torpedoes used against Sheffield were seen to be defective, and for the following attack on Bismarck were replaced by those designed to explode on contact. The attack commenced again at around 21 o'clock. A hit by a single torpedo from a Swordfish, hitting her port side, jammed Bismarck's rudder and steering gear 12 degrees to port. This resulted in her being, initially, able to steam only in a large circle which, in the prevailing force 8 wind and sea state, resulted in the ship being forced to sail towards King George V and Rodney. At 23:40 on the 26th of May, the commander of the Bismarck delivered to the German command base the signal:
Ship unmaneuverable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer.
Throughout that night, Bismarck was the target of torpedo attacks by the destroyers HMS Cossack, Sikh, Mari, and Zulu, and the Polish destroyer ORP Piran. The British destroyers didn't score any hits, but the constant worrying tactics of the British helped wear down the morale of the Germans, and deepened the fatigue of an already exhausted crew. At 8:43, lookouts on King George V spotted Bismarck, some 25,000 yards, 23,000 meters, away. Rodney opened fire first at 8:47, followed quickly by King George V. Bismarck was unable to steer due to the torpedo damage, and this was further complicated by the gale force storm. The consequent unpredictable motions made the ship an unstable gun platform, and created a difficult gunnery problem. However, Bismarck returned fire at 8:50 with her forward guns, and with her second salvo, she straddled Rodney. This was the closest she came to scoring a hit on any British warship in the engagement. At 9:02, a 16 inches, 406 millimeters, salvo from Rodney struck the forward superstructure, damaging the bridge and main fire control director, and killing most of the senior officers. The salvo also damaged the forward main battery turrets. The aft fire control station took over the direction of the aft turrets, but after 3 salvos they were also knocked out. With both fire control positions out of action, Bismarck's shooting became increasingly erratic, allowing the British ships to close the range. Norfolk and Dorsetshire closed and began firing with their 8 inches, 203 mm guns. By 9:31, all 4 of Bismarck's main battery turrets were out of action, allowing Rodney to close to around 3,000 yards, 2,700 meters, with impunity to fire her guns at what was point-blank range into Bismarck's superstructure. King George V remained at a greater distance to increase the possibility that her shells would strike Bismarck's decks. During this period, Rodney launched a pair of torpedoes at Bismarck, claiming 1 hit. The 2 battleships quickly reduced their German opponent to a shambles, aflame from stem to stern, though the Germans refused to surrender. The ship was settling by the stern due to uncontrolled flooding and had taken on a 20-degree list to port by 10 o'clock. By that time, the 2 British battleships had fired some 700 large-caliber shells at Bismarck. All told, King George V, Rodney, Dorsetshire, and Norfolk collectively fired some 2,800 shells, scoring around 400 hits. At 10:20, Dorsetshire closed in and torpedoed the crippled Bismarck, while King George V and Rodney turned for port. Dorsetshire fired a pair of torpedoes into Bismarck's starboard side, one of which hit. Dorsetshire then moved around to her port side and fired another torpedo, which also hit. By the time these torpedo attacks took place, the ship was already listing so badly that the deck was partly awash. The last torpedo detonated against Bismarck's port side superstructure, which was by then already underwater. The ship began capsizing at about 10:35, and by 10:40 had slipped beneath the waves, stern first. Around 1950, U-556 saw the battlecruiser HMS Renown and the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal coming out of the mist at high speed. But without any torpedoes, she could only submerge and avoid them. U-556 saw activity on Ark Royal's flight deck, which transpired to be the launching of the second, fatal attack on Bismarck. Renown's and Ark Royal's course toward Bismarck coincided almost exactly with her own, so she proceeded on the surface at full speed behind them. U-556's Commander's War Diary contains these entries for the 27th of May, 1941.
Midnight, wind, northwest 5, seaway 5, rain squalls, moderate visibility, very dark night. Surfaced. What can I do for Bismarck? I can see star shells being fired and flashes from Bismarck's guns. It is a terrible feeling to be near and not to be able to do anything. All I can do is reconnoiter and lead in boats that have torpedoes. I am keeping contact at the limit of visibility, reporting the position, and sending directional signals to call up the other boats. 3:52, I am moving around on the east side to the south, in order to be in the direction of the activity. I soon reach the limit of what I can do in view of my fuel supply. Otherwise, I won't get home. 4 o'clock, the seas are rising ever higher. Bismarck still fighting. Reported weather for the Luftwaffe.
Around 6:30, U-556 sighted U-74 and transferred the mission of maintaining contact with Bismarck to U-74. She gave U-74 Bismarck's position based on her observations of the star shells fired during the night, adding,
I have not seen her directly. You assume contact. I have no more fuel.
U-556 then submerged and did not surface again until noon, a time at which radio signals were routinely repeated. That was when she heard for the first time the order radioed to her between 7 and 8 to pick up Bismarck's War Diary. She replied to the Commander-in-Chief for Submarines Karl Dornitz, asking that this mission be transferred to U-74, but was unable to locate Bismarck. The battleship had been sunk before U-556 had received the first message at noon. Unaware of the fate of the ship, the German command base continued to issue signals to Bismarck for some hours. After the sinking, Admiral John Tovey of the Royal Navy said,
"The Bismarck had put up a most gallant fight against impossible odds worthy of the old days of the Imperial German Navy, and she went down with her colors flying.